So you have to be careful with
hang on.
how...
As I hit record on this, all right.
Well, you're not hitting record. Are you hitting record?
I'm recording right now. So,
well, you got to warn me. We got to do an intro.
I just literally warned you. Okay, so I don't want to hear it.
Okay, well, all right, here we go then.
So,
all right, we are recording.
Why do people choose the cards that they do? Okay, we don't really talk about all the curation aspects. We talk about all of the, why do you put this card and why do you choose that card and that card? But why do people choose the cards that they do? What is the psychology of the player, of the draft audience, of the play group? Why do they do it?
Okay, now Stu's catching up to the conversation. So are we actually recording? Because I will leave this all in because this is raw and fun.
I am recording. I just told you that. You got to cut that out.
Welcome.
We're family friendly. PG-13, baby.
Welcome to Uber Cube as Stu catches up in the middle of a conversation. So we're going to keep this one short and sweet. We've got two of our special guests on right now. Why don't you introduce yourselves, tell them a little bit about what you got going on here, and let's go.
Yeah, I'm Nathan Shoup. I have the Absolute Junk Cube and 6 Colored Calamity as the ones that were featured in this last year's CubeCon.
And I'm Kerby. I have the Creative Cube as well as the Omnipresent Imposters Cube that were both featured at CubeCon recently.
And you have another cube that we're going to play in a few minutes that I rudely interrupted and said, hey, I've got a subject I want to talk about. What cube are we going to play real quick?
We're going to be playing my Enchanted Teachings Cube, which is focused on enchantments and lesson learn, in which we got a huge boon from the latest Avatar set.
So, to catch Stu up with the question, the thing that's kind of been gnawing at my craw, as one might say, right? Like I've been chewing on this idea for a while. I have been wondering what makes me different as a designer versus, and I'm going to group together 4 people that I know their design measures and how they do things. And it's going to be Shoup, it's going to be Kerby, it's going to be Justin Parnell, and it's going to be our good friend Chris, aka Sandwich. And as I've got to know all 4 of these on their journey of doing designs and curations and building cubes and how they go about it, it's really posed a question for me to think about. And Stu led off with the psychology question, the idea. I look at things as, and I've mentioned this on previous episodes, I like to paint, I like to draw, I like to write. I lean into the creative arts. That's where I tilt. So when I build a cube, I use the principle of like a thematic fissure or a line, a meridian, a prime meridian of using like an artistic lean in, like say the Monopoly cube. I come up with the name. I lean all the way down the path and then build everything around the idea of the Monopoly. Find the card, go to jail. Put in everything that signifies economics. Tilt over to the Munson cube. Everything has to be metal. Everything has to be representative of a album cover, or the name, like Hurricane has to sound like a 1980s hair band. Go into Uber Bear's Horror Cube. Everything tilts towards the idea of the gothic horror genre and going into like body dysmorphia and this idea. Then you tilt over, say, to the idea of Uber Bear's Artifact Cube. People can look at it from a principle of a mechanic cube, but I look at it as a land of robots. Like you're a person that's fighting against the machines. This is my design metric. This is how I go about looking at it. Top-down design using a thematic prose. These 4 gentlemen that I listed off, Parnell, Shoup, Kerby, and Chris, all lean into the idea of mechanical attributes. While they do build cubes that have like a degree of thematic flair, I never, frankly, as a designer, understood how to do mechanical interlocks. And that's where Kerby kind of led into something he was just talking about and a challenge that we're talking about doing. We're doing all this off the fly, off the cuff. It's a random. Kerby, what were you kind of just spouting off a few minutes ago?
Yeah. So real quick before I get to that specific one, I want to say that mechanical design isn't too far off from what you explained for your thematic design. Like there's still a theme. Typically it's some sort of interaction or group of mechanics that you are building off of and wanting to still keep that mechanical theme throughout. So even though we're approaching it from top down versus bottom up, I think there's a lot of similarities to that process. Our minds are just craving different things. You want the story, as I want the feel of the cards interacting. To get back into what we're talking about briefly, you had mentioned about Chris's, what was the name of his cube?
Samich has now designed it's called the Exile Files. He's prepping it for CubeCon. It was a bar cube that he's now expanded. To give a little bit of backstory, the idea is basically stuff going into exile, not playing so much from your hand, getting rewarded out of the idea of stuff like flashback on an adventure, anything that steps outside the boundaries, not playing from your hand necessarily, rewards you off of stuff like that. It's really interesting. It's really dynamic. But the way my brain functions is when I hear the Exile Files, I lean towards, again, that prime meridian, that center point, that ballast point of the idea that things should tilt towards the word exile as much as possible, and or play into exile, or the creatures would have the word exile in them. The thing that was digging at my craw that kind of started this conversation was Cathar Commandos in there, and I mentioned this to Chris. And for me, as a designer, a card like that doesn't tilt towards that artistic theme. It tilts towards the mechanical attributes, the functionality of the card. Cathar Commando, I think it's, what does it cost? 2, 1 white, planes, flash, 3/1. You can sacrifice it, destroy an artifact enchantment. Not looking at it right now. Nothing about that tilts towards the idea of something called the Exile Files. So from my writing standpoint, this is different. You got my dog Odin barking in the background, and we got some Discord beeping, but we're still good. You see where I'm standing at here?
Yeah, it's a hole filler card, and there might be other options that feel a little bit more mechanically thematic, but I definitely would say you don't want to force that exile. So the example I was providing earlier was +1/+1 counters. That's a theme that's been in a number of my cubes in the past. And a lesson that I learned many years ago was you'll have players that are like, hey, I want to play the +1/+1 counter deck. So they're drafting and they see a card that refers to +1/+1 counters and they grab it. And they just do this throughout the draft. They build their deck, they play, and often not end up with a good record. And at the end, they're like, hey, like I drafted all the things for the +1/+1 counter deck, and I didn't do well. And it's because just having the +1/+1 counter cards doesn't make a +1/+1 counter deck. There are other parts of the deck that you need. You need your proper curve. You need your proper interaction based on the different environment. You need to be able to do things when the pieces don't necessarily come together. If you have a hardened scales out, but you don't necessarily have the cards that put +1/+1 counters on things, you still need to have an active game plan throughout.
Well, I have a follow-up question based on that, but real quick, we're going to do a word from our sponsors. This is going to be Uber Bears Pale Ale. I'm drinking the last one, and I'm going to make Shoup watch. It's really good. Shoup, what are you having?
Tonight is the Double Bird Incognito from Pizza Boy. Heavy IPA, delicious. Loving the hazies right now.
How about yourselves there, Kerby?
I have a rum mule.
That sounds ornery. How about you there, Stu?
I've got me an Avery Fine Milk Stout, brewed fresh from the brewery, Westbrook Brewing Company. I think this is what we had last week during our most previous recording. But anyway, it's a milk stout. It's delicious.
All right, let me ask you a question. Let's do the card, specifically hardened scales. Don't have it in front of me right now, but we get the gist. It's like 1 green, creatures in it, enter with a +1/+1 counter. If I called a cube the hardened scales cube, I'll tell you how my brain works. I'm going to build it right now, the hardened scales cube. I'm going to do the 1/1 counters, but I'm also going to incorporate dragons, lizards, and anything that has a scale on it. I would even put images of scales, something I could find, like Equilibrium, anything that had a scale in it. I would do this. This is balance, I believe, has scales in it. You see where I'm going with this?
Mm-hmm. I think that's an interesting theme.
That's how, well, we're going to build that cube now, but we have it. This is how my brain works.
I think it kind of has to be. I don't know if you could just do the hardened scales and just do an entire +1/+1 counters cube and give everyone a copy of hardened scales, right? No one steal that idea. That's mine. I'm doing that next time. But
that's my idea. I just came up with it right now. But my question is, Shoup, if you're, I know everybody's going to steal this idea. Shoup, if you're going to build the hardened scales cube and you took away the recency bias of that thing I just popped off the cuff, how would you approach a cube like that? You called it the hardened scales cube. What would you do? What would be your kind of core?
Yeah, it'd be the card hardened scales, and I would be applying +1/+1 counters in some way that made it interesting to the draft in some way. And
would you have ever tilted towards the idea of, out of curiosity, would you have went into it has scales on the images?
No, not at all.
Well, kind of what I wanted to show or reference the idea is just basically how designers approach things from a different standpoint, right? And when I look at your different curations, like, for example, Shoup, you've got the, what do you call it? The junk cube or whatever you have, right? It has themes in it. I mean, it has themes in it if you want to see themes in it. Your core theme, everything could be a theme. Anybody could argue everything's a theme. 3 colors is a theme. 3-drop is a theme. No, light removal is technically a theme. Everyone could argue the semantics. It's all semantics. But if we wanted to go into like the deep core, the root of something, I mean, where would you tilt a theme from that? Me, I'd go right to this, or was it Siege Rhino? And I'd say it's the Siege Rhino cube. And then I'd build around that. And then that core element of that very known attributes of Siege Rhino and the colors of it would then proclaim the colors of the cube. Right. And that's how my design brain works. How did you come about doing that design?
I mean, I like the idea of a 3-color cube and chose a 3-color that I felt like I could explore in a way that made sense and made a unique environment. So it's not at all a specific card or a specific feeling. It's I wanted to create this environment of interactions, essentially. And I think one thing that we haven't quite touched on is just like you can like harken it back far into like when you were in school, and there was people who enjoyed math a lot, and there's people who enjoyed like English and literature more. Like it's like left brain, right brain stuff. And I think that's kind of what we're talking about right now. Whether it's the background you come from or the nostalgia you have for Magic, we create pieces of art or feelings of 2 cards playing together, and we create these cubes in a way to like really evoke those feelings for ourselves in a way that we enjoy. I think is kind of what we're harkening back to.
Yeah, we also want to like challenge ourselves in those areas too.
Yes.
So when Shoup creates his junk cube, his Abzan cube, it's a question of what type of environment can I create with this color restriction? And Anthony, I think when you are creating these themes, a lot of times you're like, hey, this is a challenge for me to build around this theme that like others may not have thought about. Like, how far can I stretch it in this environment?
I want to follow on that as well, because I feel like, especially with 3 colors, and I will say this from experience of trying to build a 3-color cube, right? All I was trying to do, at least during the first iteration of trying to put together even a 180 cube, and I don't know if it even got past the 180 cube, was can I construct a cube environment of 180 cards? I said I'm going to start at 180 and then move to 360. Can I construct a cube with 180 cards with this 3-color restriction that is going to present not just a playable environment, but a fun enough and diverse enough environment for me to be able to build a cube that is going to have some longevity about it, that is going to be like, we're not just going to play this once and everyone's going to kind of figure it out and then, okay, that was fun and I built this deck and I see that deck was built and okay, I don't know if I'm going to have too much interest in this afterwards, right? Now I look at the 3-color design that I have in that cube versus a 5-color cube design that I have since then. And the number of challenges that it presents to sort of continue to build out the creative process versus, and I love the idea of the whole left brain versus right brain, because I don't really know where I fall in that. I maybe I kind of do in that I love the creative side, but I'm not very good at it. I love the math side, but I'm not very good at that either. So I'm always looking for a balance that really contributes to a play environment where everybody's going to be able to kind of get the rocks off and enjoy themselves, right? So for me, that was a huge challenge. Like, I want thematic. I want an experience. I want something that's going to allow the players to sink themselves in, but I also want something that's unique and is going to play mechanically in a way that's going to be fun. And that is incredibly challenging.
Well, I want to bring up a point about that, immersion versus functionality. So I think as just an open observation, and I know you gentlemen get a lot of playtesting in, but I'll even say Chris, I'll lump Chris into this because I am often one of his playtesters. I will say that my open observation for the individuals that go straight into the mechanical attributes of cards and how they gel together, basically, right? You're appealing to what the cards are capable of doing, less about the story being the driving element. Your cubes come out working, your ship runs smoother, faster than if I come in and I want to do the hardened scales cube, as I mentioned, and I start putting in basilisks and lizards and dragons, and I put in some counters, and then my well can dry up quicker by following that story name element, because the story I'm writing it as I'm designing it, and maybe I'll get bored and get writer's block. That's something that'll happen to me using that type of methodology, if that makes sense.
Can I ask you a question, Anthony?
Go ahead.
When you are starting to put these ideas together for a theme, do you try to start very small or try to start very large and bring it in, or it just kind of depends on the project?
I told you I like to write. I have some published short stories and stuff like that, which eventually I'll dig out and share them, but I've got some that are pretty good, I think. I write from the title. I come up with the title and then I write. So if I write a horror story, or if I write just like a little tiny, we'll call it a novella, but under 50 pages, if I write something like that, I come up with the title first and then I begin to bridge out from that. But my creative juices have to keep flowing or I'll dry up. This happens to me with Magic cards. Using Commander as an example, I get frustrated as a air quotes Commander game designer is if the cards tell me what I'm supposed to do. Like, I had Guillaume, I think his name was, the master chef. And, we're not going to go, I've actually incorporated that into the Monopoly Cube because for reasons, and it made sense in there. I wanted to have like the class system and showing where you've got workers and you've got the upper echelon, or whatever you want to call it, right? The 99% versus the 1%ers is what I was going for. And Guillaume just kind of fit that. But in the Commander deck attribute, I'm like, well, how many chefs and how many food-related things I can get in there? Well, the mechanics of that, the base of it, of what the card says on the 10 is make food, try to win game off of food and through some form of life game abuse, really just didn't resonate with me. I like the story of Guillaume in the Monopoly because he has a story. He's a person that's in this world that's working 9 to 5 or longer, cooking food. But in the Commander deck, he's a driving force of a theme. And that theme just designs down for you and says, well, this is all food, and you're going to try to take these elements of food and win Commander games off of what you would do with life game abuse. It's pretty much like a linear path for me. And the way my brain works is in a very divergent writer type of aspect. I think of like literally introduction, body, conclusion is how I do my base, but then I start doing story elements and plot twist. This is how I do my cube design. It may be something a little broken with me, but this is my personality. This is how I approach it.
What I was asking is, I feel like the concepts of theme and mechanics aren't mutually exclusive when we're creating things either. So if I have a mechanical idea or set of mechanics that I want to work around, and as I'm including cards, there might still be things that just don't feel right. They might have the right mechanic, but if I notice that a lot of my stuff is very, let's say, like fairy tale, Eldraine themed, and then I have some sort of construct, like we'll say like a Necron or whatnot, I might just go, this seems a little out of place here. Like, it's kind of filling that role, but if a large majority of the rest of what I have going on in this cube project doesn't feel very thematic with it versus just a hodgepodge of different things from amongst Magic sets, I may choose to exclude it on a thematic reason.
Okay, can I ask
That makes sense.
Yeah, I was going to say, and based on what I've been working on with my cube, certainly trying to refine things over the last couple of weeks has been the more that you drift away from a thematic point of view and a thematic sense from what maybe a lot of the core artistic aspects of Magic have been over the last 10, 20, 30 years, the much more difficult it gets to create a thematically driven cube just by virtue of the fact that if there isn't some kind of fairly direct support for that, the more limited you are for your card choices, right? So Anthony will attest to this. We played my Diablo cube a couple of days ago, and I said, one thing I'm really trying to force a little bit with this is giants, right? I love giants and some of the synergies and some of the cards and the effects that they have, but there just isn't enough good options for me in the card pool to really provide good support. I want to support ETB effects that care about number of giants. I want to support, other giant elements. It's just not there, and it really, really sucks. One of the biggest reasons for that is, and this kind of makes sense, there's not enough low CMC, low converting mana cost giants that exist in Magic. There's some half-decent 3 and 4s. Some of them have some really serious drawbacks. Some of them are kind of expensive, and that might also be a limitation. But I also have to consider that so carefully during that cube design process that I'm thinking, okay, maybe if there isn't enough of a support for that theme, for that vibe that I want in the cube, especially if there's something that can operate in the sort of lower mana value levels, maybe I've got to think about removing that theme completely, because otherwise I have to completely redesign the whole cube, or I have to really lower the power level of some of the other themes that I have in that cube. And I will say that has not been a fun experience for me.
Well, let me add something to that real quick. So I'm looking at some Drafts Matters cards right now. I was trying to think of it. And this is kind of that multi-layered storytelling that you can do. And I'll cite May on this one in particular. So the Fey Cube, as we know, is kind of, literally the front cover is a storybook, and you're opening up the storybook. So the way you see this from a relationship as a drafter, if you want to do the immersion point, is you've opened up the story, say like the never-ending story or whatever, and you're now in the story. You're part of the story. But what I found fascinating is like the card Lore Seeker for 2 colorless. It's a 2/2 artifact creature construct. Reveal Lore Seeker as you draft it. After you draft Lore Seeker, you may add a booster pack to the draft. I believe conversationally, she had spoken about this card and how it could be functional in the Fey Cube. And if you're asking yourself why, is because Lore Seeker on the art itself is appearing to be going through a library, picking out a book. So now you've went outside the world back into the real world. So you're now the little kid in the never-ending story. Now you're going to the library and you're checking out the book. It's a different way of looking like multi-layered, multifaceted way of writing a story, jumping through worlds, if that makes sense. So if you're getting pigeonholed or painted into a corner while trying to do this thematic design, is what I'm arguing with you, Stu, you can now go up levels and down levels in your story and get reachy, whether it be the name. Another card that I'll say that I'm looking at now that has caught my eye, and I'm thinking, why am I not running this in the Monopoly, which is based on economics and based on trading and selling and tariffs and deals and everything about it's just through and through. That's what the words have to say. Deal Broker for 3 colorless. You get a 2/3 artifact creature construct. Draft Deal Breaker face up. Immediately after you draft it, you may reveal a card from your hand, from your card pool. Each player may offer you 1 card in their hand in exchange for basically a card that you have, and you can accept 1 offer. And then it has draw a card, then discard a card. I'm going to add this to Monopoly because it's Deal Broker. And it creates, normally I don't like the Drafts Matters cards. It's not my flavor. But something like this very much fits into that world that I'm designing. Just like Lore Seekers checking out a book from the library for all intents and purposes. If you're going to reach that far. Do you see what I did there? You kind of jump through like the multiverse of a story.
Yep. The other solution you have, Stu, is they keep printing magic cards. So you might finally get some of those giants you're looking for in Lorwyn soon.
You know what? It's crazy you mentioned that, because this is something that Anthony and I talked about, and I want to actually go back all the way to the origins of our podcast. Is when sets were released, my first thought was, how can I improve my commander decks? This was 4 or 5 years ago, and we were still just playing Commander exclusively. And that was really all I cared about, because I wasn't playing Modern anymore. I've never really played Legacy or Vintage. So anything that came out, my first thought was, okay, how can I improve my Commander decks? Now, I've realized this age-old lesson that I got from Anthony, which was, no. You are going to get to the point where you're no longer looking at how can you improve your commander decks with the new sets. You're going to be looking at how can these new sets improve my cubes. And that's all I do now, because you're absolutely right. All I'm doing now is, are there any giants in this new set? Or are there, anything where I feel like there's something lacking in one of my cubes and I want to bump them up a little bit? That's what I'm doing. I don't know if maybe that's sort of a rite of passage for cube curators from I have been involved in Magic in any other way, and now I'm just sort of more emotionally and more whatever, emotional aspects of Magic. Now I'm more invested in cube. I kind of feel like, and maybe that's just a question I can ask for you guys as kind of a subtext of this episode. Like, when did you go from, I have looked at the Magic sets and looked at the releases and looked at any aspect of what those cards might improve outside of standard, which is obviously like what, how do they improve my standard deck? But when do I go from, what do I do with these standard sets to how do they improve my cubes? I'm at that point now. I feel new. I feel like I'm fresh.
Yeah, I don't feel like there's necessarily a point. Maybe once you have figured out your theme, that is the basis you need.
Yeah.
But to give a couple quick examples, we were just talking about my Enchanted Teachings Cube. That's something I've had for a little while now. It used to be a smaller 4-player cube. And now we have Avatar with lessons. We have Strixhaven coming up. So like I have that excitement of what else can I add? But even for something like my Creative Cube that I've had for a long time, it can be argued that it was kind of my first cube and has transformed into what it currently is. Since playing different cubes at CubeCon, there's actually some bigger changes that I want to make that I wanted to do in the cube many years ago and just didn't feel like the cards and enablers were there. And after getting to play a few cubes, especially like Vistas Unventured, I got to play these decks where I was like, oh, this is what I was going for. And maybe I didn't quite see the interactions before, but some of these include newer cards that I wouldn't be able to do until just this year.
So, Shoup, where do you land with that?
Yeah, so a couple points there. I think I'll first say that my interaction with reading new sets is just different than most people's. Full disclosure, I work for Star City Games as part of the product catalog department, so I make all of the new cards for Star City Games, or I have at some point in my life made a lot of the cards that come through for Star City Games. So I read every card and I have just a different interaction point. So I don't think I have a point to Stu's idea there. But I do think that in general, cubes go through like 3 different points of curation. And the first one is like the original creation of the cube, and you like finalize your first list. That is your first point, and I usually call that creation. And then your second is curation, where you figure out what works and what doesn't work, and you edit things out. And then the last point is not something I have a title for, but instead just like it's now in its state of finish, where you are updating things that already exist for all your themes and fixing them in certain ways. And it's not to say that it is
refinement. You're
refinement. Great
polishing
term.
it. You're polishing it.
Yeah.
And it's not to say it is truly refined, because you will jump back to stage 2 when something doesn't start working quite as well as it used to, or you want to change things in a certain way. You'll jump back between 2 and 3. But Stu right now was talking about that third stage of refinement, where this cube is in its almost finished state, and I look at a new set and I say, this is the new selections from the set that I'd like to incorporate in. And so you use that idea to then fuse back to that. Last thing I'll add, something I had to learn from my 6-colored cube, where Eldrazi is a large part of this cube in a legacy-style environment, so it's pretty aggressive and quick. Eldrazi traditionally are very large. Something for giants, for example, you might look into a way to bridge them from early game to late game. So Eldrazi in my 6-color cube plays in a way that plays like Tron almost. You use a lot of early speed bumps, use a lot of early ramp, and you kind of maneuver that early game to then finish in the late game with Eldrazi, or in your case, it could be something like a Giants, where you find a middle ground.
Let me ask you a question. I want to ask you a question about that cube.
Yeah.
When you designed that cube, was the Eldrazi your principal, your core, your center, and then everything else went from around it? Or how did that come to pass?
So a lot of times when I build my cubes, my first thought is I want a home for this theme that I really like. I really liked Eldrazi, and I liked all the stuff I got from Modern Horizons 3. I wanted a place to be able to put that, and I didn't really know a place to put that. But once I have that idea or theme, I then look at the cubes that are available in my local scene, and I say, hey, what's a spot I can fill that doesn't currently exist for them? You know, in our current scene, it's pretty much just me and Kerby currently creating things. So Kerby had his creative cube, I had my Abzan cube. I wanted something that was a bit faster so people could live with a legacy or almost vintage cube if they wanted to play with that. So I tried to power it up as high as I could. And I look at my local scene. Yes.
Follow-up question on that particular cube, because I've played this cube. And Kerby and I had a match that lasted for eternity, but it was quite possibly one of the best Magic matches I've ever had. And I think we ended in almost quitting, stalemate, but it was amazing. You remember this? We played one night at Uber Cubathon. But you have representing in that cube a lot of legacy components, a lot of straight up mechanical, like net positive, everything mana positive type cards. Everything's efficient. And then you have Eldrazi. How do you blend those two worlds where you're trying to paint a picture of this is like a Doomscape full of Eldrazi and colorless mana is kind of a central theme, but yet you're running in there cards that are legacy high-powered playables? I found myself tilting towards those as a drafter out of confidence and accessibility and knowledge of that format. Eldrazi is the actual overarching theme, and people can be rewarded for that. But my question is, how do you make that thin red line? How did you know where that percentage need to land to make the Eldrazi, that concept, to be appealing to your drafters?
It's about a couple things. I view, in the first place, multicolor as never a point of somebody wanting to play flexibility, but instead somebody wanting to play with cool or interesting cards outside of that. If I'm in Simic, I'm much less excited to play Bant Charm and Splash White, but if I see like a Chulane or something random of a Bant variety, I might be more interested to go into that. So Eldrazi in that instance, when we're adding a quote-unquote sixth color of colorless, you want to make it interesting enough that people will want to play it in anything they can. And it didn't quite work out that way. You can't play it in every single thing. But you can play it in a way that makes it interesting itself alongside that.
So we just had an episode about this, and so your element was the Eldrazi, and that's what you wanted to shine. I think I already know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask it anyways, because Usman and them kind of answered it, and Ian. But how does that make you feel as a designer if people don't follow the breadcrumbs of that core?
It's not about them at all. It's about me as a curator not creating in a way that worked for them. You know, maybe I didn't have mana that worked well to enable those type of ideas. Maybe I didn't have a card that kind of read in a way to make them understand that. You know, an early thing I learned with the Abzan Cube when I created it is that whenever you open your first pack of cards, and something says something on it, it's important to like show the payoff for that in some way on a future card. You can't just have like one or two cards that like breathe towards that. Something like a life gain theme.
That's a good segue into Kerby, because I was going to ask a question about the Creative Cube, because that's a whole different way. So Creative Cube to me just kind of drips of thematic design. It's almost like the Live the Dream if someone's looking for a relationship by David McDarby. In my mind, that's how I see it. How did you start the Creative Cube? Did you find one or two interactions and just keep linking them like a chain or a web? Or how do you even do something? Are there individual card drivers, like core principles? I don't know. I want to understand.
Yeah, I don't know if this is actually a good cube to try and answer your question, since this is kind of my legacy cube, not format wise, but long term, just evolved over time. I learned my lessons and started to change it over time. Like CubeCon, what year? 2023. I had it featured, and that year I learned my lesson of things were blending together so much that people couldn't really find lanes, and I wasn't quite hitting that theme. And then the next year I'd iterate on that and have more exciting things, give people direction. When I think of something along the lines of like finding that point of creation and where to find those starting puzzle pieces, I actually think of my Omnipresent Imposters cube, where everybody receives 2 copies of a mystery booster card called Omnipresent Imposter. It is 2 colorless for a 2/1. It has Changeling, so all creature types. It has all card names, and if you would search your library for anything, you can search for it instead. So that was a challenge of, okay, what do I do with this? And then you start to find the cards like the partner withs. You find things that are typo related that you care about. You find different cards that can help search it out of the deck. You find these weird interactions. There's a card called Secret Salvage. It is 4 and a black, sorcery from one of the old Ravnica sets. You exile a non-land card from your graveyard, and you can search your library for any number of cards that share a name. In no other environment is this card very good, but in this one, it's a demonic tutor for any number of cards. So you kind of find your core theme. You find just a couple things within that theme that you really like to do, or you would like your players to aspire to do. And then you start to build out from there, is often how I handle those styles of cube.
So we have a challenge that we're going to present in a few minutes that Stu's not privy to, but he's going to get that low down in a few minutes. We've got a thing we're going to do. We've got a project coming up here. This is going to be fun. We're going to turn this into a kind of a long-winded series. It's going to have a long tail on it, if you will. All right, I got a question for you, Stu. It's kind of before we kind of tie up here.
Sure.
So the Diablo cube is kind of the best of both worlds on this tilt, where you took a video game.
I love
inspired...
that you called it the best. I don't know if it's the best of both worlds in anything, but I love the positivity that you have about my cube. Thank you.
I like what you did.
That's
because
wonderful.
You took a video game and you brought it to life. You made a video game
that was
into
the
like
point.
an artistic creation.
Yeah, exactly.
And then now over time, you're leaning towards the idea of a little bit of optimization because this card's not working and this card's not working and this card. Back to my point in the beginning of the episode when we started talking, if you go too far down the just slapping paint on the wall, doing a Jackson Pollock or whatever, and we start doing that, I can have errors. It can be very Monet, if you will, right? Looks really good from a distance, look up close, got problems.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the design attributes I use. And the reason why I was stating at the beginning of this episode that Kerby and Shoup and Chris and Justin Parnell's methodology of linking the chains early on sometimes allows their cubes to mature faster, at least in my personal experience of playing their cubes. I've talked about this after I've played it. I'm like, man, damn, this cube just hums. It just hits. Like the first time they're like, this is like maybe the couple times it's been drafted and it feels like it's been around for 10 years.
I feel like you've been much more friendly to mine Okay, let me just put that out there. I feel like, we've done this podcast for a few years, and now I have, the first was the Doom Cube, and now I have the Diablo Cube. I'll be honest, the more that I look at this and the more that we play it, the more that I think there's so much more that I want to do with this. And I don't know if I'm ever going to be happy. And that, they say about perfection being the enemy and all that kind of stuff, but there's so many things that I wanted to achieve with this cube, and honestly, the biggest problem for me has just simply been that I wanted there to be more support for the themes that I wanted to be so critical for this cube that are just not supported well enough by the cards that exist in the Magic the Gathering universe. That's it. Giants are a great example. We talked about this earlier. I really hoped that I would be able to do more with Giants. I cannot do it. The more that I now look at it, sort of take that 40,000 foot perspective, I'm going to have to do a whole lot of work to really get it where I want it. A lot of work.
So, which leads me to the challenge, and we're going to see if this one can stick. Sometimes, podcasters do challenges, creators do challenges. We hope they stick, but I think this is a neat one, and I'll see how far we can make this branch out. But this was Kerby and Shoup kind of came up with this idea. And as we talked about it, I've thought about a few rule sets so we'll put down, and everybody tells me if they're okay with it. So what Kerby has suggested is make us get outside of our comfort zone. So what he has challenged me to do is build a cube, digital only. We'll do it on Cube Cobra. I'll construct it. We'll do 180 card cubes each. Let's try to do 5 colors if we can. Let's see how far we can stretch 5 colors. I don't know how reasonable that is, but let's see if we can do it. And what they've asked me to do is do a purely mechanical centric cube. Try to use the methodology of a central theme. Try to stay away from too much color, like the best I can. Try not to make it into a multi-level story. Try to make it into, this is a functional thing that if I draft it, I can hit my marks and make a pretty synergistic deck.
Easy.
In 180 cards.
Easy.
Okay. What I'm challenging
accepted.
the shoot. Well, you get to pick which one you want here in a minute, Stu, since you're saying it's easy, because I don't know where you land. But I'm going to challenge Chris with whenever we talk to him in person. But I'm challenging Kerby and Shoup.
I got my ideas. I got things I can make happen.
Well, I'm gonna let these two define what they want out of you. We'll make this easier. Which one would you guys rather have Stu do, mechanical or theme?
Ooh, but we'll go mechanical.
Yes,
I think it's mechanical.
Yes,
yeah.
That's what I was hoping.
All right,
thank you.
These both Shoup and Kerby, I'm going to ask them to just tinker around over the holidays if they do want to. We'll try to get back sometime in January, maybe February.
Christmas.
I'm not going to put a homework date on this, but it'll be something we can tinker with. Don't stay up all night doing it. But what I want to do is try to make like a little list of try to do 5 colors if we can, if it's reasonable. If we can't, 3 colors is probably more reasonable. Of those two doing something on a thematic tilt, and see if they can peel their brains away from synergy and interlocking. And I'm going to try to do purely mechanical interlocking. Stu's going to do mechanical interlocking. And then what I thought we could talk about in a future episode, have all of us on again to kind of not critique, but how we might see it through our different, you said the left brain, right brain, and how you went about doing it. And let's just see what we can kind of piecemeal together out. And let's kind of keep our homework separate. Let's don't do too much sharing. Let's make it kind of a reveal thing. I think it'll be fun. Like the first time you see it, it's the first time you see it. That might be kind of fun. What do you gentlemen think?
I already know what I'm doing.
Well, be prepared to talk about your process too. That way, the listeners can get like an idea of how you did this.
I was
and
issued a challenge. I already and I think maybe that's.
So you'll get to take my hardened scales cube out the gate.
No, but, okay, so I got the inspiration just okay. You want to know what I got the inspiration from? I got the inspiration.
You're sharing your homework already.
I got no.
It's against the rules, Stu. It's against the rules.
I got my inspiration from a picture. Okay.
Okay.
I am going to take that inspiration and apply that mechanically for my somewhat limited, certainly less than the gentleman that I am on this podcast recording craziness right now. But I am going to apply that and couple that with my knowledge of magic mechanics, as this is going to be a mechanical cube, and I'm going to make something fun. That's going to be
I want to add
one more piece
to this to rack your brains. for the creative people in particular, I'm wishing to see a nice little TLDR, a little bit of thematic flair about itself too. Like, you can see how May does hers and how I do mine, and how we try to project like the story, because that's like the front page when someone looks at it. They want to get not a synopsis, doesn't have to go too much, don't make it complicated, but enough to paint the picture that whenever I look at your TLDR, I know what your story is and what world I'm about to immerse myself in. Is that fair?
Easy.
Well, not you, Stu. I'm asking the other two.
Easy.
I'll give a full disclosure. I recently made a cube called The Legacy of Bloodwake Atoll, which is a flavor first.
I know you did.
World.
You did. It's beautiful. You're beautiful. It's beautiful. But you got to do another. I want you to do another little small one, just a short pad one.
I'm more than happy to do it. I'm just letting you know that I've done this slightly before in some version.
Looked at the Monopoly and kind of, we talked about that. You piggybacked off the idea of the Monopoly and chained into it. And then I saw other ones kind of come up with, like, another person in our Discord did like an island theme, which is pretty amazing. We've got this on the UberCube Discord. We have this shared projects folder. It doesn't get a lot of action, but it gets enough that whenever somebody gets stuck, they can say, "Hey, what would be appealing or beautiful here? What would help this cube resonate?" And I really want to kind of do this so that this translates to the listeners, so they can get something out. And I'm going to pose this question to the listeners: if we could be binary with this question, which one are you? Are you the artistic, or are you the thematic, or do you meld somewhere in the middle? And I'd love to hear from you, right? Hit us up on our Discord or our Gmail or Twitter or Bluesky or whatever medium you want to. But I think it's just interesting to kind of find out where they come from a principle. Do you do top-down design, or do you start working from a core, or do you use a center card, or how do you go about your design, and where do you get to? What's your intent? Because I think this is I love how you summed this up before we close this out. Could you please one more time talk about your 3 different phases of cube design, Shoup? That was wonderful.
Yeah. There's creation, then curation, then what we called refinement. Creation just being that period of I'm creating my cube up until the point of I have my first initial list. And then once we get that first initial list, we go into curation, which is our period of figuring out what works and what doesn't work. Some themes will work, some themes won't, some ideas will work, some won't. And then we go to refinement, which is we pretty much have the idea locked in and everything works. And now we just need to update as things kind of happen through the life cycle of Magic.
Well, that's perfect. And I think that's a good mic drop. So I think we got a cool little challenge we can kind of tinker with. We're moving into the holidays. I'm not sure when we're going to release this. This is a totally off the hip bonus episode. We're supposed to be
just
drafting a new cube.
Get it out there.
But we just YOLO'd this, and I'm just going to tag in some socials, and I appreciate you both coming in, and thank you very much, and happy holidays to everybody here, and I hope all of you have a wonderful time.
Happy holidays! All right, as always, want to give a huge shout out and a big thank you to all of our Patreons for their ongoing support. If you want to get in on the conversation, go check out facebook.com/groups/mtgcube. 1,200 members now getting in on the conversation.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. You can find us at Twitter at UberCubeMTGPod or at Bluesky, ubercubemtgpodcast.bsky.social. If you want to reach out to us, you got a longer question or comment about the show, ubercubemtgpodcast@gmail.com. And as always, come hang out with us on the Discord.
We're going to say the thing that we always say here at UberCube is
Happy Holidays, Cubing!